Hello everyone, it is time for the much awaited Psyker builds. This is with the new update, so we'll be able to see the new talent tree here in a second. I've got 4 builds prepared for you. I have 2 pure casters, 1 pure non-caster, all gun related, and 1 hybrid. So let's strap in. I think all these builds are very strong. The Psyker has landed himself in an excellent place. And what I will say is if you love crits, you came to the right place, because all of these builds are absolutely abusing the hell out of crits, because Psyker has an amazing 7.5% innate base crit chance, and they have a bunch of crit in the tree they can use to some pretty crazy ends. Let's first talk about the melee weapon that all the builds will share, which is the Macabian Mark IV. This weapon was already goated. Now it is even higher in my tier list because it has perfect stats, as you can see, but also with the addition of 2 new blessings. Well, one is a new blessing, one has just come to this weapon. Thrust, which gives up to 60% damage for charging the attack. Let me show you how long it takes to charge that attack. That's 60% damage right there. And with that, combined with 25% damage to Carapace and 10% melee damage to elites, we can do this. Well, it head popped him there, but there you go. Without the head pop. So the only damage, or the only enemy that's really fearsome to us with this particular build, or many of these builds, are crushers, are these heavy crushers. A lot of times the problem that Psyker has is they do a lot of damage, but they have a hard time dealing with really high health targets, targets that don't get stunned by their abilities, and could overwhelm them. So it's really nice to have this weapon. Didn't charge that first one, but it's really nice to have this weapon that can just be your can opener and absolutely solve that problem for you. Yeah, it's pretty good damage wise. Yeah, 2 shots just about anything. Very nice. So that is the melee weapon we'll be using on all these builds. You free to use whatever you want. I just think that this is going to be an absolute S tier weapon for me. All right, this is an electric shock build. So we're using electrokinetic force staff. This used to be called, hello buddy. We're using what used to be called the Surge staff. It's the Lightning Bolt staff. It's the Sith Lightning staff. Now we did get a new blessing for it, Surge. So Surge is going to shoot 2 shots on critical hit and give us 5% crit chance. Now unfortunately, it doesn't mean that you get 2 lightning bolts for our secondary for this attack. You can see it still has plenty of damage, but it does not give us 2 lightning bolts, unfortunately, after a good bit of testing. But it does double up on our left clicks, which end up doing a kind of ludicrous amount of damage, like that amount of damage, like that amount of damage. If you do hit the crit, which is very often, you can see my crit chance in the middle of the screen there in the red. With only about 40% crit, I'm at 58 or 40% peril, I'm at 58% crit. And that goes even higher, obviously, as you get higher and higher peril due to the other blessing on the staff, which is Warp Nexus. This thing is absolutely godlike at getting crits, and those crits, when you do, they double up the projectiles you shoot, so they do stupid damage. Before, when I was running this build, I was basically going through the whole level and spamming the lightning bolts like this, which still does fine damage, but since they have added Surge to it, you really don't need the other blessing to lower the cooldown or lower the charge time on this weapon. It's plenty fast. Those left clicks are so precise, and they're so fast, and they deal so much damage. It would be a shame not to weave them in. You could even do, if you really don't like using the right click at all, you could literally just go through the whole level, just machine gun these left clicks, and probably, do as much DPS as anyone else on the team. Yeah, you can see how long it's taking my peril to max out. You're only getting 1.5% for every left click you do. So that is really nice, and that's because of one of the new talents we'll touch on later down here. We are taking Kinetic Flare. I don't think this was the case before, but this is a 15-second cooldown. This is really good free damage. It's a lot of damage too. And remember, every time you crit, you're shooting 2 bolts instead of 1, so you have double the chance to proc this on targets. We want our cooldown to be as low as possible so we can vent as often as possible, and that means we're going to take Psychonetics aura, but we're going to skip over kinetic present, or the cooldown one, and go for the crit, because crit is awesome. Crit is where it's at. And then we're going to come down through one with the warp, because why not be tough, and we need to go this way anyway. So venting Shriek with Becalming Eruption and Creeping Flames. This is our gameplay cycle. We want to get Creeping Flames onto enemies by venting like this, or by spreading Soulblaze through our one of our other talents, and then we want to kill them. Because when we kill them, you can see down here in the bottom, I can't aim at it, but down here in the bottom, I'm getting my stacks of Warp Siphon. And I have the talent allotted that gives us 10% chance to get a warp charge every time we kill an enemy that's affected by Soulblaze. This is how we affect those enemies with Soulblaze. And this makes a really nice gameplay loop because we vent, which starts our cooldown, and we put all this Soulblaze on enemies. When we kill those enemies, we get all these warp charges, and the next time we vent, our warp charges are exchanged for cooldown reduction. So we have 6 of them, and each of them gives us 7.5%, so that's 45% cooldown on a 30-second ability. So you only have about 15 seconds that you need to go before you can vent again, and you can lower that by killing specialists, which is going to give us about 2 to 3 seconds. Is it specialist or elites? Correct. Specialist or elites by you or allies in your coherency. So really, really sweet stuff. And we can basically just channel abilities and shoot them all day without any worry of exploding, thanks to Empiric Resolve, which is a new talent. It lowers your toughness replenished, which includes all toughness replenishments. Like metal, instead of getting 5% toughness, you'll get 3.5% per crit, which I think is a fine trade-off. You also have to play a little bit safer, but since the lightning from the staff staggers enemies, you're really not in that much danger anyway. This is best played with like a team full of tank speeds. You're just going to do absurd damage. You'll do enough damage to carry everything else. But that amount of peril generation reduction is just nutso. That stacked on top of any peril reduction from warp charges here. I mean, just really, really nice stuff. You could, if you feel like you're not having enough defenses and you're having a harder time, swap this one for Essence Harvest and get some more toughness back. But remember that 30% toughness is reduced by 30%, so it'll go down to 21% toughness. All right, and then we come out here for Warp Rider and for this extra 5% crit chance. So that's basically the build. And let me show you one trick that you can employ when you're using the build, is that when you're nearing your absolute crescendo of your peril, when you're getting maxed out, there's a fun trick. I'm certain that if you've played Psyker for any amount of time, you know this, but I'm gonna go ahead and max out. Okay, now I'm maxed, and I can cast when I'm at 100%. You get one free cast when you are at 100% and not over. It's like this will bring me to 100. I can go ahead and cast right now, and it's pretty much a guaranteed crit because it's like completely maxed out my peril, and then vent. Basically, I never vent unless I see that animation of I'm getting a migraine and my head's about to fucking explode. So that is my good tips for that one. All right, so that is our first build. This is a very, very easy build. It does a ton of damage. It is a little bit on the fragile side, but I would very much rank this into the low S, high A tier. It's somewhere right in there. The only thing it's lacking is it doesn't really have any means of like really helping the team outside of doing insane damage and like staggering things with the electric staff. If things get really, really hairy, you might find yourself in a bit of a pinch because we don't have much to like get out of the situations other than to just shock stuff and then vent and hope they get knocked back. But other than that, I mean, it's so simple. It costs nothing to do. You get infinite ammo and you do stupid damage. So good stuff, really good stuff all around. Speaking of infinite ammo, let's talk about a build that does not have infinite ammo, and that's its main drawback, which is Scriers Gaze lasgun. So using the same primary as before, here's our lasgun. I'm not listening to this Christmas music. Here's our lasgun. So we want to dump mobility as a stat because mobility is already really high on this lasgun, and we need as much ammo, and collateral and stability all affect and damage obviously affect how much damage we do and whether or not we actually hit the target. The perks you're going to need are going to be crit chance, and then I recommend damage against unyielding enemies because that's bosses and bulwarks, and those are two high health enemies that we can actually shred the health of with the burn stacks. You will do almost no damage to armored targets like crushers with this build. That's why we bring the can opener. The burn stacks do nothing to them without rending, and we don't have any rending because we're not veteran. So same setup as we'll be seeing on plenty of other recon lasgun builds, but headhunter, because that's guaranteed crits on top of the already stupid crit rate that we have, and then burn stacks from infernus, which is what makes the whole build work. With that plus this talent right here, which is every 5 weak spot hits gives you a guaranteed critical, stacks with this one right here. So we're getting guaranteed crits all the time if you can aim. And if you're playing this build, I really hope you can aim. If you can't aim, play the first build. It's really good for people that are just like autopiloting. But this build, you have to be able to aim, but when you do, you're gonna put all those burn stacks on enemies in like a second. It's really easy to spray across a horde of elites, and you're gonna get them all dotted up with fire, and they're gonna burn to the ground really quickly. So we need to be able to boost the damage that those burns do, and here's how we do that. So first of all, we're going metal. Metal replenishes 5% toughness every time you crit, and so you can fill your entire toughness bar back in like a second with this gun. It is really funny. You can tank a boss because the boss will hit you and you'll get all your toughness back before he hits you again. We come down this way just because it's the best way to go. And we're going to get this because it's free damage. We're going to come out here and we're going to kinetic flare because it's free damage. We're going to get wildfire because it's free damage to spread our soul blazes from killing elites. Then we come all the way over here. We go through melee attack speed and we pick up Soul Drinker because we are not going to be able to stay and use only our range weapon the entire game because ammo is a big limitation for Psyker. If you play this build or a recon lasgun build on veteran, you have the advantage of having basically infinite ammo due to their lasgun critical shots not taking any ammo. But the Psyker doesn't have that, so you will need to melee stuff, and that is why we're coming out here for Soul Drinker and by Crack of Bone, because this is going to allow us to use our Scriers Gaze and go into melee and do absurd melee damage, as well as draining some of our peril and getting even more crit chance and being tough in melee as well. Really fun to go into melee. You're going to do absurd damage because let's go on down here. We're going to get 5% crit chance because why not get some fucking crit? And then dodge duration. Remember, the weapon that we're using gives us infinite dodges, but it doesn't make our dodges better. This makes our dodges twice or 1.5 times as long. So it's basically the chloranthy ring. I think that's the ring, what it's called in Dark Souls, that makes your dodges super long. Your iframes are really big. This is great for that. We don't care so much about that second part because we're going to be refreshing our dodge count all the time. Then Scriers Gaze is really where this whole thing comes together. This and Disrupt Destiny are going to work together and give us super augmented damage. So here's what Scriers Gaze does. When we activate this, we start to gain peril. You'll notice we don't have any casting in this. We're not using assail, we're not using smite, we're not using the actual brain rupture. So all of our peril is being devoted to Scriers Gaze. So Scriers Gaze starts to tick up our peril, and for every second we stay in the Scriers Gaze without overloading our peril, we have this buff of 10% damage, 20% crit chance, and we get suppression immunity. And then for every second we spend in there, we gain an additional 1% damage up to 30%. So what we want to do is we want to make it to 30 seconds in this to get that maximum damage multiplier, and that lasts for another 10 seconds after leaving Scriers Gaze. So there's about a 15-second cooldown where you won't have this, and that can be reduced, by I think there's a couple like ability coherencies that can reduce it, but it's really not that long to worry about it, and it's usually up when you need it to be up. So normally before this update, it was hard to keep Scriers Gaze active long enough to actually get the benefit, because it does reduce your peril when you get kills, but it generally wasn't enough unless you had a super target rich environment to deal with. We also are going to take precognition because We can use weak spot kills here to give us more of that buff sooner, and it gives us finesse damage, which is headshot and critical damage, both of which we really want to be doing, and it lingers for 10 seconds afterwards. So what our goal is to spend about 40 seconds in Scriers Gaze, 30 to 40 seconds in Scriers Gaze, and we want that 20% movement speed because we're going to spend so long in there. We're going to be flying around, because if we do 3 crits with our lasgun and then we pop Scriers Gaze, we're moving 35% faster. We're faster than a zealot, I think. Pretty close anyway. All right, crit chance down here and Warp Rider, because since we're using Scriers Gaze, we're getting high peril by the nature of Scriers Gaze, so why not take a free 20% damage amp on top of the free 30% damage amp here. This is a time where I'll re-mention something that I've talked about in one of my previous videos, which is that when we get these damage amps like this, they apply to the damage over time abilities that we do. So if I apply my fire stacks to a bulwark or a boss, it might do 100 damage, but with all these damage amplifications, each tick is going to start doing more and more, you know, it's going to be multiplied as well. It's not just the flat damage that you do up front, it's your dots as well. So this is why this is so good with the burn. All right, let's come down here. This is what makes this build so much better than it was before this update. This new node here, non-warp range critical hits quell 4% peril. Check this out. Let's just go ahead and get my peril nice and high. Oh no guys, it's getting away. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to event this much peril. Okay, so that's how we vent our peril, right? And I let it go for a while before getting control of it, but if you keep it low at the beginning, I mean, you can see here, I'm still keeping pretty low. Look, we just got 27 stacks. We're almost maxed out in terms of damage for that. And that multiplies all the burn damage and stuff we do for the next 10 seconds. So it is super nice. And remember, it just has that, it has a crit, a finesse damage, a crit buff. It has all these buffs that comes with it. And the only downside is how long you can stay in it. And this allows us to stay in it for so super long. All right, and then finally coming down here for Disrupt Destiny. Disrupt Destiny is also another buff. If you can, so we can go up to 55% movement speed if we kill a Disrupt Destiny target and have Scriers Gaze going and do 3 critical hits, which happens often. And we get this precision bonus that stacks every time we kill one of these enemies. You can go through this right tree, so it's 10 seconds long, and we get 2 stacks every time we get a headshot kill, which is often. So yeah, we're gonna have this precision bonus going, which gives us crit damage and weak spot damage, and it multiplies all this other shit that we're doing. So we are an absolute weak spot destroyer on this build. Yeah, if you get like even a second to shoot like this, that guy's gonna burn to death first of all. Yeah, you could absolutely just eviscerate everything that's in front of you. It's super high DPS, but it lacks in utility elsewhere, right? You are going to be the absolute glass cannon and eviscerate everything. Pressure's accepted. You will need to crack out the melee and go in hard on them for that. But yeah, if you are a high skill player and you want something that really encourages you to weave melee and range, this is absolutely a super fun build. It's super aggressive, does a ton of damage. It's just lacking in, it's like you're playing the game by yourself. There's nothing you can do here to really help your team. There's nothing in this build that's gonna like stagger or knock down enemies. Your contribution to the team is you are gonna kill the shit out of everything. So I'm gonna rate this one in the A tier. I don't think it's quite as good as the lightning staff, just because it's more difficult to play and it has similar, maybe a little bit poorer results in general. All right, so cool. If you like that idea of a build, like using the recon lasgun, but you would like to contribute a little bit more to your team, here's a build that I'm gonna bump up to S tier because it has a little bit more usability. This is a hybrid caster recon lasgun build. So we're gonna split the time that we would be using our recon lasgun with throwing assails out and using our sword. So it's pretty much the same build. You can see the difference here is instead of going over here to brain rupture, we go through Assail, and instead of going over to Scriers Gaze, we're going to take Telekind Shield. So the idea here is that we are going to shoot our lasgun until we need to reload or whatever, and then we're going to throw out all of our assails. We're going to get to 100% crit, and we don't use our peril for anything else in this build, so we're free to spend the time where our ability is cooling down, just shooting stuff, going in, getting some stabs done. And then once our assails are all gone and our perils are back, yada yada yada. So you can see the nice loop there. The additional thing that makes this build an S tier for me that is really nice is we can put Telekind Shield in here, which is the Scrier's best ability. The Psyker's best ability, the one that helps his team the most, that is more likely to guarantee a win than any other ability you can bring, because this thing is just awesome. It regenerates your toughness, it gives you a forward bastion to fight from when you're in a big open room. It's just such a nice ability in general to have, and we can put it in this build. This build is so good at both single target and cleaning up trash, because these little assails are so very nifty at picking off small targets, that might be running like dogs or these little guys, and then we can save our lasgun ammo for the more armored targets that we can focus in on, our Reaper friends that the assails wouldn't do much to. There's a really nice coherency between these two due to some new talents that are added. You can see we come over here for 3% warp damage on critical hit, stacks 5 times. Now, generally, it's pretty hard to get, 5 crits that stack up like that. It's going to be pretty hard. But with this Recon lasgun, we can get 5 crits like that. Or sorry, that's there you go, like that. So now we have that 15% warp damage, and that applies to our assails. The assails, we want to take both of the augments because these both just make the assails flat better. And then we come down here for Malefic Momentum. So what this does is we get 4% damage to warp attacks for 8 seconds after a non-warp based kill, and the inverse. So when we're killing things with Assail, we get up to 20% damage with our lasgun, and when we kill things with our lasgun, we get up to 20% damage with Assail. So these things are just working together hand in hand. Such a nice cooperation between the two, and it is very natural to weave the two, because you'll just want to be using Assail whenever you have the Assail charges and whenever you have peril to waste, and then you use the lasgun and fill the gap in between. We also take empathic evasion, because this is just an extra layer of defense. Why not take it? It makes us dodge against range attacks whenever we crit, which is often. And then the Telekind Dome, obviously, with the Sanctuary modifier, which is what makes this ability so good, regenerating our toughness all the time. We're going to take Warp Rider because we want to have our peril very high from throwing all those assails. It's going to multiply the damage for our lasgun and our burns. And then we're going to take Kinetic Deflection because this is the additional way that we can really help our team. The problem that Psyker has is they have very low stamina. So if you're in a situation where you need to save your allies, it can be very hard to get them off the ground because your stamina will get broken. But with this, you don't really need stamina. You can just block with your peril instead. And since we're not using our peril for anything else than throwing assails, we can just wait until our peril is low and then go ahead and go for a rescue. That's very easy to do. And then we're going to go ahead and take Tranquility through Slaughter. This is going to make an even faster way for us to cool down our peril so we can get back to throwing a few more assails out there. The assail charges regenerate pretty quickly with both of these buffs here. And then finally we go for Disrupt Destiny, because Disrupt Destiny gives a crit damage modifier and a damage modifier, which modifies both the damage of the assails and the crits and all sorts of stuff that we're doing. It's just a great flat damage buff that you can have all the time, and it lasts for you can't see it in this arena because it doesn't target units in this arena, but you're just gonna have this damage bonus all the time, and it rocks. It is easily one of the most usable talents on the whole tree, and it just gives you this awesome buff. All right, guys. So this is, I think this is my favorite build to run on Psyker currently. It's the most fun. It's probably about as strong as the Shock Staff is, but I think it's a lot more fun. It's more engaging to play than the Shock Staff. And you get the bubble, and the bubble's really good. Alright, and let's go into our final build. This is another pure caster build, a little bit more defensive than the first build we showed with the shock staff, but it has its own set of strengths. So we're using the VOIDSTRIKE force staff with this one. This one, our goal is to do one of two things. There are two different ways you can play this build, and I have it set up for kind of a hybrid of the two, but there are two different sets of blessings that you could run with this build. If you wanted to go for a purely blazing spirit, meaning Soulblaze based VOIDSTRIKE build, you would swap out Surge and you would choose this blessing right here, Warp Nexus, which is going to increase your crit chance. So we're going to get more blaze onto enemies, and this can be really, really good. Generally, in that case, you're just going to be throwing out the charged attacks into big groups and trying to splash them all and getting those soul blazes onto them. With the inverse build, if you want more direct damage, you want to go for Surge with the, and I'm showing them only here, like both of them, so you can see what the two ones that are operative that are going to make this build work. You want to go Surge as your primary blessing with Warp Nexus as your secondary, because both of these rely around having that high crit. You can see that from the perks there. We want critical hit damage and ranged crit chance. When you do get a crit, you'll shoot two like that. You'll shoot two orbs that do just an absurd amount of damage. Without Warp Nexus, you don't quite have high enough crit chance to really guarantee it very often. So we do want Warp Nexus if you're going for the direct damage. But that is to say, both of these options are really good. One is a direct damage focus where you'll charge those secondary attacks and hit like an absolute truck. It can like two-shot crushers and stuff like that. Or the other one is going to spread more flame around the arena. Both are going to use the same tree. So we're coming over here for our crits and our critical hit warp damage, and then we're going on the left side. We're taking Kinetic Flare and Brain Rupture just because it's free damage, and we don't intend to use our peril. We don't intend to use any of these abilities, using our peril for that. We're using our peril to cast with our staff. Then we take Wildfire and Psykinetics Aura, because who doesn't want cooldown reduction? And Wildfire is going to spread Soulblaze, which is something that we're intending to do with this build, is to crit and spread Soulblaze. Even if you have the non-Soulblaze staff version, you can still spread Soulblaze through this, just not quite as much. We do come out here for melee attack speed, because okay, but Soul Drinker is really important because it's going to give us toughness back when enemies die with Soulblaze on them, and it gives us 5% crit chance, which adds into our chance to spread more Soulblaze and crit more. And then we take a 5% crit chance because yay crit. We come down here and we grab Telekind Shield because it's just an awesome ability, and if we can grab it, we should. And then we go all the way down for more Quell speed, because since this build is not using Venting Shriek, you will need to Quell, and 30% Quell speed is nothing to shake your nose at, especially because, as you can see, I used Quell speed as my dump stat on my staff because I picked up the extra 30%, and you can see here, let's just go ahead and get a little bit of, it's going to take me this long. Like, that's very quick to vent all of our peril. It's not that big of an investment. We don't want to get the penalty of 30% less toughness regenerated, so we stay away from Empiric Resolve in this case. You could use it if you wish, but since we're using Telekind Shield and this regenerates our toughness, I think it's nice to have the full benefit of regenerating that toughness rather than 30% less. So we're going to take 10% rending on warp attacks, just because if you get rending, it's that 10% rending is going to make a big difference in dealing with armored targets when you hit them. And then finally, we come down here into Warp Siphon, just because Warp Siphon multiplies the base damage of our stuff. It's going to give us even more toughness regen when we gain those warp charges, and we gain those warp charges by, I hate this song, we gain those warp charges by killing all those enemies we've lit up with Soulblaze. So I hope that is understandable, that there's two ways you can play this build: a more Soulblaze oriented version of it, or a direct damage oriented version of it. Both of them are going to have some Soulblaze. Just the Soulblaze oriented version is going to rely on those dots to do a lot more of the damage, versus the other one, which is going to rely more on the double shots from Surge to do more of the damage. Anyway, everyone, those are 4 builds. Oh, and I would rate this build in the A tier. I don't think it's quite as potent as the lightning staff currently is. It takes longer to charge, and I think the lightning staff is just kind of busted, especially with Surge, and the fact that it can like stagger enemies so easily, and you don't have to aim. There's no travel time for the lightning bolts. That's just such a usable staff. Yeah, I think that all these builds are just really strong. I think Psyker's in a good spot. I would love to see a little bit more. I would love to see something new for blitzes for them, because I find like I'm not using these blitzes in almost any of the builds, just because they take so long to use, and they take time away from me using the cool toys that Psyker has, which is their abilities or their staves, and I don't really want to use them instead. So that's my critique of Psyker, but I think Psyker's in a really great spot. All of these builds are going to be super strong. They can carry you in endgame, and I hope you enjoy them greatly. Anyway, I have got to get back to playing. I spent all of my money. Oh my god, I spent 3.5 million credits and 30,000 each of my resources just today alone. Anyway, y'all, thanks very much for watching. Like and subscribe if you wish, and I'll see you next time. Bye.